Hello, it's Justin from Trackbikez. There's a lot of information and opinions on the proper way to prepare your bike for the winter months, from guys that do a complete teardown to guys that do almost nothing. I'll give you a quick rundown of my winterizing process, which has worked for me for almost a decade, and maybe it'll work for you too. From a high level, I focus on the three major fluid systems: fuel, coolant, and oil, the rear sprocket and chain, and the electrical system. One big advantage I have is being able to move my bikes indoors for the winter. They're in my dining room. This saves me from extra work in prepping the coolant and fuel systems, since I know there will be no freezing or large temperature swings. Prior to moving them indoors, I put the bike on stands and change the oil and filter. I've already siliconed the new filter on, but I have a drain plug removed because it's being drilled for safety wire. I've used an old rag to plug the oil drain for the time being, and put a drip band underneath the bike. If you leave your bike in the midst of a repair or maintenance for more than a day or so, I suggest writing yourself a note or reminder until you complete it. With the bike still on stands, it's a good time to clean your chain, checking for kinks, and adjust the tension. Take this opportunity to look at the rear sprocket wear. Replace your sprocket if it's worn, and replace your chain if you find kinks. I've started to track my brake pad wear at the end of each season, especially on the front. I pull the calipers off and use a micrometer to measure the remaining pad thickness. I know I have enough pad to run another season before I need to order replacements. Be sure to torque your caliper bolts to spec when you put them back on. Next is the fuel system. Putting fuel stabilizers in your tank is fine. I've never really noticed a difference using it or not over my typical 4 months of storage time. I do recommend topping off the tank, especially if your bike sits outside over the winter. The less atmospheric air in your tank, the less likely it is for air to condense when it cools. Moisture in the tank is something to be avoided. Obviously, this is not a huge risk if your bike is in a climate-controlled environment. Onto the coolant system. I run distilled water with water wetter in the track bike. I top off the system at the radiator and then the coolant reservoir if necessary. If the bike was going to be exposed to freezing temperatures, I would drain the system and replace with standard glycol coolant, which is what's in the Hayabusa. But moving them indoors saves me this step. Leaving water only in your coolant during sub-freezing temperatures is the recipe for a major repair come springtime. Finally, I take time to give the bike a decent cleaning. Not only is it mandatory before I move them indoors, but wiping down the fairings and engine gives me a chance to look for any leaks or other maintenance that I should look into over the winter. It sucks to try to pull major maintenance during the track season. A tip for the extra greasy or stubborn areas: WD-40 makes a pretty good cleaner and degreaser. It works great for me to clean all the chain wax that collects on the rear wheel over the season. Once indoors, the last step is the electrical portion, basically putting a battery tender on the bike. I swap my tender back and forth from the SV to the Hayabusa at the start of each month, and it works out well for me. There's always the option to remove the battery from the bike as well if your space is limited or you want to keep the battery somewhere away from where the bike is stored. But I can attest that keeping the batteries on a tender over the winter has increased their life. That wraps up my winterization process. It's worked for me for many years, and I think it's a good balance between doing nothing and tearing down the whole bike. I'm interested in hearing your tips and tricks on what's worked for you. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.